This Week in South Carolina in session. I'm Gavin Jackson here at the State House in Columbia. Well, today, Wednesday, we always know is a busy day up here at the State House, and today did not upset. We saw both the House and Senate go very long today. Both of them dealt with two major bills that were filibustered for the most of the day. Over in the House, we saw lawmakers deal with the Sanctuary Cities Bill, H4496, and in the Senate, we saw lawmakers deal with the SCE&G rate reduction bill, S954. Now, both of those measures were passed respectively out of their own chambers. Actually, the House still needs to give a third reading to that bill, but it's going to go right ahead and get that perfunctory third reading. And 954 was returned to the to the House. More details on 954. That's the bill that would reduce SCE&G customers' rates by 13%. Currently, SCE&G customers are paying 18% of their bill every month for the failed VC Summer nuclear project. Now, this will be a temporary move if the House goes along with it to temporarily reduce these rates until regulators can change them later this year and when they hash out a more long-term fix. So this is just a temporary move until later this year, but we did see substantial debate on this. Again, this was debated prior to last week when the budget was going through the Senate, and we did see lawmakers debate it in the Senate both Tuesday and Wednesday. So a lot of debate over this bill, which now goes back to the House. But it's worth noting that the House had amended this bill, which is a Senate bill, to reduce those 18% rates all the way down to zero, which is something the governor wants to see done as well. He said he won't sign any other bill unless those rates go to zero. So expect the House not to concur with this and then set up some sort of conference committee situation going forward, which is interesting because we got 10 days left in session. Things are going to get pretty hairy pretty quick. Back to the House, well, we got more details on that, but back to the House, we did see them debate that Sanctuary Cities bill, which would crack down on municipalities and counties from passing any ordinances that would prohibit them from, enforcing federal immigration laws. We've seen this in some other states, but there are no cities and no counties in South Carolina that currently do this. There are already laws in the books that prohibit them from doing it. This was a different tack that the governor wanted to see taken. Again, Governor McMaster was pushing for this bill, and we even saw one lawmaker, Jonathan Hill, try and rename the bill the re-elect Governor Henry McMaster bill, the Governor Henry McMaster Re-election 2008 Act. So that didn't go through, but the bill did get amended by one of its top critics, Representative Micah Caskey, who's a Republican from Lexington County. It changed some of the reporting requirements, which we'll give you some more details on once we get there later in the episode. Also, we did see some discussion about I-95 and possibly tolling Interstate 95. There's a study that's out, and we did see Senator Brad Hutto, Democrat from Orangeburg, talking briefly about it in the Senate. We have some video of that. And we did also see a Senate subcommittee move that bill that deals with call spoofing. You might have gotten one of these phone calls that have the same area code and the first 3 digits of your cell phone number, or even all 6 digits, or even all 7 digits, sorry, of your phone number. So this bill would crack down on call spoofing and increase penalties for those tougher regulations. So that bill now moves to the full Senate Banking and Insurance Committee. So more details on that as well. And we did, to wrap up, we did see some activity with lawmakers talking about the passing of former First Lady Barbara Bush. We did see the flags go to half staff over the State House today. But let's start right now with those SCE&G rates being reduced by 13% to 5% in that bill that just passed the Senate today back to the House. Here we go.
If we go forward and adopt the amendment that the Senate and pass the bill as it is with the Senate amendment we adopted a couple weeks ago, we're going to have a temporary experimental rate that's going to last until December. So your constituents who all of a sudden are getting a $20 reduction in their bill starting in June, July, August, September, October, November, December, the bill's going to go back up. And I don't know what you're going to tell them, because you're sure not going to, I mean, what are you going to go home and say? Well, I voted to reduce your bill, but right at Christmas I said, that's enough. You got to pay it again. We didn't want you to have it for Christmas, so we'd make you pay it again in December. I just submit to you that we're putting ourselves in a position where this is not going to make sense to the average voter. Yes, everybody likes the idea that their bill might go down by a few dollars, $20. And I don't tell anybody that $20 is insignificant. That could be on a monthly basis. $20 is significant, but it's going to go right back up.
You know, now that brings it, you jarred something else there about why, you know, I keep hearing about there are no other offers on the table. Y'all know why there are no other offers on the table? Y'all know why there are no other offers on the table? Because SCE&G is contractually prohibited from negotiating any other offer.
And would you tell us the cost of getting out of that negotiated?
There's a whole lot of money. I can't remember.
$240 million.
Y'all, there can't be any other legitimate offers on the table because Dominion and SCE&G put as part of the agreement that they couldn't negotiate anything.
And did you know that that amount to get out of the contract was $240 million?
SCE&G, since July, could have petitioned with the Public Service Commission, asked for an expedited hearing, and voluntarily reduced their rates on their own. Have they done that? They have not. They saw the House vote 100 and something to whatever it was, and I got the roll call here, to take that 18%. Did they go to the commission and ask to reduce their rates? No. Did they ask to reduce the amount of the return on equity or return on investment? No. 11% for 10 years. They're now getting 10.5. SCE&G hasn't asked to reduce their return on equity. So don't talk to me about Dominion. It's not Dominion. This debate's not about Dominion. This debate's about a company that operates in this state who has mismanaged and abused their right in this state.
And like I said, debate was long in the House today over that Sanctuary Cities Bill, H4496. Again, that would crack down on cities or counties trying to pass ordinances that would not uphold current federal immigration law. Right now, no city or county does that in the state of South Carolina. No one's even proposing to do that. This is just seen as somewhat of a push from the governor. Many have already kind of called him out for doing this just because it's an election year for him, trying to come across as being tough on immigration law. But at the same time, we did see, like I said, one of the top critics, Representative Micah Caskey, come out with an amendment that did easily pass, and that changed these annual reporting requirements for these municipalities that were originally supposed to certify every year that they were not a sanctuary city. That got rid of that aspect, and it also got rid of the ability for the state law enforcement division, SLED, to suspend any funding for those municipalities should they have been found in violation of not being a sanctuary city. So a lot of little intricate movements there, and the bill was kind of thought to be dead, but it did pass with the necessary 2/3 majority, which is needed after the April 10th crossover day. You might remember that April 10th was crossover day. Bills that are somewhat contentious need 2/3 to pass from the other chamber. So let's get some more details from the bill's sponsor, Representative Bruce Bannister, as well as Representative Micah Caskey.
The Senate just passed a version of this. What it does is it authorizes and requires SLED to issue a report each year detailing that all local governments that receive local government funds are in compliance with 2 state statutes that are currently in existence. One of those state statutes it prohibits municipalities or local governments from passing laws that prohibit their law enforcement officers from being able to determine the immigration and citizenship status of people that are stopped in their in the law enforcement interactions. That would include people applying for public benefits, verifying their residence, or determining their compliance with federal law. The second law that we require municipalities to assure us that they are following is that when a person is charged with a crime and that person is incarcerated, during the period of time the person is incarcerated, the jailer would be in a position to determine that prisoner's immigration status, and in determining that person's status, if that person was here illegally, they would be required to contact the federal ICE, basically, and make arrangements to turn that person over to the federal government if the federal government wanted them. So what this bill does is says you have to certify that you're in compliance with those 2 laws. Number one, if you've got a criminal in your jail, You determine if they're a citizen or not, if they're here legal or illegally. And number two, you can't prohibit your law enforcement officers from checking somebody's immigration status.
If you weren't convinced already that this was the state of law, we wrote it down elsewhere in our code. At section 6.170, we say, again, in subsection B, a political subdivision may not enact an ordinance or policy that limits or prohibits a law enforcement officer from seeking to enforce a state law with regard to immigration. Here again, we've established that's the law. The question, though, and I think is very rightly asked, is what happens if? What happens if someone does it? We know, for example, in South Carolina, we've banned murder, and yet people continue to do that. So what happens? Well, this brings us to the point where our law does need help, where our law can be improved. Next slide. You see, in that same code section, it establishes what happens, or what would you do if a municipality or political subdivision adopts a sanctuary city policy. And it says, a resident of a political subdivision in the state may bring a civil action in the circuit court to enjoin the enforcement of those policies. Did you know that? If a city did adopt one of these sanctuary city policies, what would have to happen then is a resident in that political subdivision would have to bring a suit in civil court to stop the enforcement of that. That's it. That's where the law stands today. And that's where my amendment steps in to do a couple of things. Here's an important piece. We are going to allow, under my amendment, the Attorney General to step in and have standing to bring a suit in a civil case in a circuit court to enforce the law.
And before his long filibuster on S954, Senator Brad Hutto, a Democrat from Orangeburg, did talk about a study that just came out from the South Carolina Department of Transportation that has looked at tolling Interstate 95. Now, it's just a proposal, it's just a study, no legislation has been proposed to do this, but he was just talking about what it could yield for the state should they want to toll 95, especially when it comes to trying to fund some improvements, which he values at $3 billion over the coming years to fix Interstate 95 and widen it. So here's some details from that study as Senator Brad Hutto spoke on the Senate floor today.
They've done this study and they've determined that 42% of the people that travel on I-95, or really that travel on most of our interstates, but particularly I-95, are from out of state. Between I-26 and Hilton Head, 70% of the people are out of state. And so there are 4 major bridges that have to be replaced on I-95. And you've driven in Florida before, you've driven in Georgia before, you know it's 3 lanes down there and it gets to Hilton Head and it bottlenecks. And we are trying to build a port at Jasper. We're going to need some infrastructure. So what the report is going to show you is to replace those bridges on I-95 and widen it to 3 lanes. It's going to cost nearly $3 billion. So what we did with the fuel tax was a start, but it's never going to get us where we need to be. And y'all know how important infrastructure is to this state, and particularly as we talk about the port, the new port in Dillon, the port in Charleston, the port in Savannah, which we use, the port in Jasper, which we hope to use. All of those hinge on I-95 being a viable 3-lane road resurfaced with new bridges. It will probably take about 20 years to get all this done, but if we don't start collecting the money now, we're not going to have the money when we need it. And so it's projected that we would collect somewhere around $76 million a year, start putting that $76 million aside and start at Georgia and move on up as we resurfaced, widened, and replaced bridges. So,
and like I said earlier, the Senate subcommittee from the Senate Banking and Insurance Committee did move along a bill that would crack down on spoofing. Now, that's that technology where telemarketers mimic several digits of your cell phone number and make it seem like a neighbor's calling you because it's either looks like your phone number or in some cases even is your entire phone number, which South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs director said has confused many residents, especially older ones, when they see their own phone number calling them. Currently, this bill would actually increase fines on call spoofing on telemarketers that do this, And it also encourages people to report call spoofing to the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. So here's some more from the director herself.
But this is a real update. We have a robocall statute and a telemarketing statute currently, as Dr. Gilbert stated. In Title 16, the robocall statute was deemed unconstitutional back in 2015, I believe that it was, and that really is an area that is heavily regulated at the federal level, and there are changes being made all the time. However, general telemarketing rules have been updated a few times at the federal level, certainly not at our state level, and so as Dr. Gilbert stated, this brings it more in alignment with the federal law. The spoofing language, there is a federal truth in caller ID law that went into effect in 2009, I believe. We have gone above what that floor is at the federal level and given a few more restrictions and some examples, such as unless you have your business here in South Carolina, you can't be using that South Carolina area code. There are, it's tailored because there are some legitimate reasons why telephone numbers are spoofed, such as if you're calling from a battered women's shelter, it's not going to show up as that telephone number. And there are businesses that engage in mystery shopping, that they're hired by the company to ensure that their customer service and quality of service given by their employees is up to policy, so they will also spoof numbers. So that's been tailored appropriately. There have been some lawsuits, so we looked at those to try and make sure that we have some language that would pass muster. Well, currently what we do is we give it to the Federal Trade Commission, and they're creating a database of telephone numbers that law enforcement agencies all have access to. The Federal Communications Commission just passed a new rule in November of last year that is permitting telephone providers to block the numbers before they even get to consumers as one effort, one arm of it.
That assumes it's a fake number, not.
And House and Senate lawmakers did take time today to pause in memory of former First Lady Barbara Bush, who passed away on Tuesday at the age of 92 from COPD. President Donald Trump did order flags across the country to fly at half-staff, as did Governor Henry McMaster.
Ms. Barbara Bush, a life certainly well lived. Let's stand in a moment of silent prayer for the Bush family.
And that's all we got for you today. We will be back up here at the State House on Thursday, giving you any legislative updates that do occur out of the State House today. Of course, like I said, 10 more days left until Sine Die, May 10th. That's 10 legislative working days left until May 10th, which is the last day of session. So a lot needs to happen. A lot of activity is going to be going on between now and then. So be sure to stick with us every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, live at 7 p.m. on SCE&Tv's Facebook page, our YouTube page, and my Twitter account at Gavin Jackson. We have those video recaps there, and you can also find them on SCE&TV.org, where we have the State House Daybook every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. The State House Daybook, we kind of give you a rundown about what's going on, where it's going on up here at the State House, as well as the top state news headlines from across the state. So be sure to check out SCE&TV.org for that. Also, stay tuned for daily news updates from South Carolina Public Radio, and check out State House Week every Friday with Russ McKinney, where he recaps the legislative week. I'm Gavin Jackson for SCE&TV up here in Columbia.